Welcome back to the On Adventure podcast. I'm Josh Self, and I'll be your host. My guest today is Hannah Thornton. If you were impressed by my last guest, Van, you're going to love this interview. Hannah is a force of nature. That's the only way I can think to describe her. She has so much weight and gravitas behind the words that she says because of her life experience. I love this conversation. There's a lot to learn, a lot to take away. I hope you enjoy it. So without further ado, let's get started. All right, Hannah Thornton, here we are.
Hello.
On the On Adventure podcast.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, great. Okay, so I've known you for a little while. Known your parents for a little longer than that. What I know about you is that you love adventure. You love the pursuit of something new, something not in Raleigh, North Carolina, which is where we're currently sitting right now. And what I find in these conversations is that all of these pursuits start somewhere earlier. So curious, what is the first adventure that you remember going on, and how old were you?
Well, the first one I remember going on, because there's some places I went to as a kid that I was young, don't really have a memory, but one of the first places I would say would be in high school when I had the opportunity to travel with a program called the Cambridge College Program. I did that between my junior and senior year of high school. And what it was, American students could go for 3 weeks and study at Cambridge University, take some classes, and then do some activities, travel different places on the weekends. And then I remember the opportunity to add a week on in Paris. And I remember having a conversation with my dad, and we both said, why not? When will I ever have that opportunity again? What if I don't have the opportunity again? And so we did it. I did the Paris add-on, and that sort of became one of the trending phrases for the rest of my various trips and adventures up to now, that when am I ever going to be here again? What if I'm not here again? What if I don't have the opportunity again? And it's really served as a jumping stone, a sort of an encouraging stepstone to doing more, to seeking out more, to not waiting for an opportunity that I might end up realizing I've been waiting for so long. And that's the heavier, I guess, more deeper reasoning for one of the explanations why I travel is that my dad spent his whole life saving so that he could retire and then travel to all of these places and have all of these adventures that he had wanted to do, but ended up passing away before he could do any of those trips. And so he had spent all that time and money to do what he wanted. It came down to all those years were just him waiting, and he never ended up getting that adventure. And so I see that as a lesson for me to don't just wait to have the adventures, to go see the places. If you have the ability, physical ability, and the interest, do it now. I'm forever changed because of it.
Yeah, so it's your version of Carpe Diem.
Yeah.
I'm curious, was that an implicit legacy or an explicit legacy from your dad? Meaning, were these pieces that you put together be the implicit kind of subconscious part of that? Or was that a conversation, did you have that conversation with your dad before he passed?
No, I did not have that conversation with my dad. That's something that I came upon on my own, I would say. It never played out or came to words how I just described it to you. There are a few examples of things where I knew that my dad didn't want me to stop and wait, because his death was not a very quick, sudden thing. We knew it was coming for a long time, many years. And so there are a few times when I studied abroad in college and then traveled after college once I had gotten a job, and where he reassured me from possibly wanting to stay behind, to be with him at the risk that I would be taking away time with him. unknown time that I didn't know how much we had left. And he was one of the first to encourage me. You can't hold your life back. You can't say no to the things you want and should be able to experience. So there were a few things like that, and he's the one I got my travel bug from, I got my travel bug from him, but other than that, it was just something that I came to on my own.
It sounds like it's a little bit of both, a little bit of conversations that you had with him along the way, and then also putting the pieces together and living through that with your dad. So for everybody listening, you grew up in Raleigh, North Carolina, is that?
Yes, born and raised, one of the few.
One of the few. Yeah, you were not transplanted here from some other location. What high school did you go to here?
Sanderson High School.
Okay. And you went where for college?
Meredith College. And then I'm in undergrad, NC State, currently.
Okay.
No, not
grad
undergrad.
School. Yeah.
I'm in grad school for NC State right now.
Undergrad at Meredith, all 4 years?
Yes.
Grad school at NC State right now. And what are you studying?
I am working on my Master's of Ed for Learning, Design, and Technology to be an instructional designer and e-learning developer.
Okay. I'm not entirely sure how this is going to tie back, but I know at some point your travels and what you're exploring will overlap with what you're studying from a professional career.
I've used things I've learned, pictures, items I've brought back, objects, stories that I've brought back from my travels in my teaching that I did this previous 8 years, and it's very much enriched my classroom. So I certainly see how I will use a lot of the elements of geography and rural appreciation and cultural relevancy into putting that into my creations.
Very good. So you explored a little bit starting in high school. It sounds like you did some traveling through college.
Yes, I did Iceland in college, as well as Belize and Ghana.
Where'd you go in Ghana? Because I have a little bit of history there.
I went to primarily the main capital, Accra. And we were there to support, my college had an alliance, or we called it more of a sisterhood, with a orphanage there. And so our group went to help within the orphanage, as well as, and that included working with the kids, doing lessons, math, reading.
And that was in Accra as well?
Okay. And then also there was helping them become more self-sustaining. We helped them build a chicken coop and plant fruit trees, which that was a lot of work, but it really helped them be able to not only have more food sources for them, but giving them a way to sell some of the resources that they had. And so when we were not doing that, we did travel some around. We went to the coast. We saw an incredible...
Did you go to the slave castle?
Yes, slave castle. And interestingly enough, that was actually traced, Michelle Obama's relatives were traced back to having gone through that slave castle. It was amazing.
Did you actually walk through there?
Yes.
It still
smelled. It still smelled after all of these hundreds of years. They showed us the line on the wall that was over my head. I'm 5'2". It was over my head, and that was the line where I think in the 70s when they were digging, when an archaeology group was digging, that was the ground level of these cells, but they discovered it wasn't the actual ground. It was just feet upon feet of the gathered human excrement, all of the bodily fluids over these hundreds of years that had just been piling up and up and up, and had never been cleaned. And so where we were standing now was the ground, and just seeing that line over our heads and the smell still lasting, still stuck in the walls, it was a very humbling experience.
Yeah. So this is not an interview about me, but I'm going to tell a quick story of my time there. Right after college, I spent, I think it was 10 or 11 days. We flew into Accra, but our main destination was up in the northwestern part of the country, which was like a time travel machine. It was like going back thousands of years because, I mean, you leave electricity, you leave normal civilization, you leave houses, and we lived in a village for a week that was built with mud huts. That's all they had. at the time, we flew some main carrier to Accra, but once we got in-country flights were run by the Ghanaian Air Force. They were like 737s, but their Air Force was responsible for maintaining them. So we flew from Accra to a town in the north called Tamale, looks like tamale, and you land on this concrete platform and you look across and there's like a barn. You realize that's the terminal. And they park the plane, you deplane on the concrete, they bring a tractor out to get your bags, and then you're on your way. At the same time, the people were waiting in the barn to come out to get back on the plane. And so you like single file past them as we were leaving, and they're getting on the plane. And I'm telling you that because that plane left to head back to Accra, and it crashed on the way back. Oh. And 7 people that I had just walked past died in that plane crash. You may remember the storms in Africa, and particularly Ghana, are fast and violent. Like you can see it on the horizon, and within 10 minutes, it's monsoon, lightning winds. And apparently the pilot tried to beat the storm back to Accra.
But didn't make it.
It got blown off course into a field, and the plane crashed. So the governmental reaction to that was they shut down air traffic for weeks. And we're in a village in middle of nowhere.
So you were
Ghana.
there longer than expected.
No. Our team leader made a decision at some point that week that we needed to get back to Accra, and the only way to do it was bus travel through the country. And so we boarded a bus in Tamale. And Tamale is in the north of the country. Where the village we were in was a 6-hour drive down dirt roads from Tamale. Wow. So we had to drive 6 hours back to catch the bus. And then the bus ride, I think, was 18 hours through the middle of Ghana, through the middle of the night. No air conditioning. It was the kind of bus where there's 2 seats on each side of the aisle, but then there's this jump seat that flips out to make essentially a 5-person bench across, and that's the way they fill the bus up. So it was row after row of 5 people across shoulder to shoulder for 18.
No space to move or anything.
Oh my gosh. It was one of the most miserable 18 hours of my life. And it was dark, so it wasn't like I was getting to see the country. And anytime we tried to open the window to let some airflow in, native Ghanaians would hiss at us.
Why was that?
Because they were cold. So they're so acclimated to the heat that any kind of airflow cooled them off too much, and we were dying. And so they'd hiss at us and wave us to move the windows back up. And eventually we made it back and got home safely with a crazy story to tell. But at the time, when we got out to the village after that first night, and we were with a missionary group that had basically CB radios, and somebody got on the radio and found out about the plane crash. They're like, there's no travel. And so we're like, what are we going to do? And we ended up just sticking it out for a week, doing the work that we were planning on doing, which was building a house, and figured it out by the time it was time to head home. But that's my experience of Ghana. Yeah. I got to see a lot of different parts of it. And when we got on the bus, the first thing it did was turned and headed north. We're like, no, this is not a good start.
Uh-oh.
And Burkina Faso, I believe, is the country right above Ghana. Bus went all the way, apparently there's a bus stop there, went all the way to the border with some armed guards standing in the middle of the road as the border, and stopped, picked some people up, and then turned around, went back to Tamale, and then went the rest of the way. And I'm going, why don't we just wait for him to come back? But I regret that we didn't get to go to the slave castle, because I've since read about that. But one of the villages that we rode through between our destination and Tamale, our guides pointed at a really big tree, and there's some really unique, unbelievable trees in that part of Africa. But it was this tree trunk base of it that would probably been 3 men standing around it, holding hands to get to the base of it. I was like, okay, that's a neat tree. And he told, it was too loud and dusty to go into the story, but he told us once we stopped that was a tree where they would shackle. So whether it was the Muslims came through Ghana and captured a lot of the villagers and turned them into slaves, but then I believe the Crusaders also came through. There's like multiple levels of using Ghana as a slave capture, which is why that castle is there. It was a launching point of sending Africans into the Caribbean and the Americas. this tree was, for I don't know how long, but it was known that was the shackle tree. That was where they put the villagers that they were going to send down to the coast. They'd put them in chains and they'd tie them around this tree, and then many times leave them there for days. And the tree's still there. So like the castle.
I remember them showing us a huge pit that was one of the spots along the way to the slave castle. I think this was at Cape Coast, is what it was called. And this pit was for bodies of individuals that hadn't made it, or they were going to execute for whatever reasons, being sick. And it was very eerie. It was very eerie being there.
So it was just a mass grave, essentially. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you had the same experience, but I recall moments like that, and just the thought of, how does another human being do that to another human being? We're capable of doing some amazing things for each other, and we're capable of doing some incredibly horrifying things to each other. But the one thing that I recall, and this is gonna be a question back to you, is a sense of awe at the bigness of the world. So, for the most part, I grew up on the East Coast, up and down between Ohio and Georgia. We traveled a little bit, but Africa was the first time I'd ever left the United States, let alone go to a developing country and experience some of those things. And I was just blown away at, it's like, these people are living on the exact same planet that I am. And it's so big and so diverse, and it's such a wide range of experiences. For me, it planted a little bit of bug of, oh, there's more here. Like, there's more opportunities for this.
Exactly.
You mentioned your early ones in high school and some through college. Has that built along the way? Have you this kind of awe and curiosity about other parts of the globe as you've done these different things?
Yes, I would say I interested in pretty much every part of the world, going to see so many parts. I find that I don't stick to the normal countries that you hear of somebody wanting to go to, Italy, France.
Have you been to these countries, or do you avoid them?
It's not that I avoid them. I have been to Italy, I have been to France. But for example, France, I was 17 when I went there, so I certainly see myself going again as an adult and seeing what else it has to offer. But I do not see those as my priorities or those as my only choices. I also find joy in, and I would say joy as well as fulfillment in going to places that people might not expect, or that here in America we have got certain perspectives, been given certain perspectives on biases, and seeing them with my own eyes, and seeing how different our history and our media portrays that place and those people, and developing an opinion for my own. I would say, in terms of places that have really shown me how big the world is, I really got that feeling, especially in Peru. And
what was it about Peru?
So first, I was able to spend a good chunk of time there. Nothing lengthy, but it was about 22 days in Peru. And so it was a good opportunity to explore a lot, to be in places for longer, and not just have a quick, super touristy kind of experience and then leave. But the imagery, the visuals, the experiences of Peru, I felt like I was really connecting with the history of the Quechua people. And
in what way? Like, it seemed familiar to you, or?
No, it certainly did not seem familiar. Everything about Peru was different. The only thing that seemed familiar was, oh, llama, or oh, alpaca. I've heard of those before. But even then, I'd never really seen one, and now I'm touching them. But Peru has such a connection to their history and their culture, even given all of their history with being colonized and the impact of Spain and their culture and language, which is certainly there and you can see it and it's a part of Peru. But their roots are so deep and are so important to people. And we would see some Quechua priests doing various sacred rituals, trying to honor Pachamama, which is like Mother Earth. And they would actively be praying and hoping for things and wishing for things, whether it was for a safe childbirth or for a good grade on an upcoming exam. And they had so many, not just rituals, but everything had a meaning there. And of course the scenery was beautiful, but to them it wasn't just mountains. It wasn't just valleys. It was the Valley of the Gods. Everything was sacred, and it was important for you to honor that. And there was one time when I did this experience where you could hike up a cliff of a mountain, and towards the top you could sit out on these glass places where you could eat. And I was definitely one of the most adrenaline heavy experiences that I had, because you're climbing up ladders that were, I still don't know how they were in the cliff of the mountain, but they were in there.
You're putting a lot of faith that they're stable.
They were just rammed in there. Maybe some super glue or something. I don't know. They were drilled in there. And we had a carabiner to hold us in case we fell off the ladder, and we would just dangle there instead of falling to our death. But it was a good at least an hour climb, and you're just climbing up ladders. And when you got to the end of one ladder, you would switch your carabiner to the next ladder and then keep climbing. I remember the first 10 minutes were the scariest, because I was telling myself, what are you doing?
You're choosing to be here.
Yes, I'm choosing to dangle off of a cliff. And I just kept going. I just pushed through. I appreciated the scenery where I was, the coolness of the air, and of course the meal at the top was worth it. The views were as well, but that was the Valley of the Gods, and just feeling the importance, not just, oh, this is pretty, but the importance to the people and being a part of that and appreciating it really gave me a new perspective beyond just having a good time.
That's cool. So you said that's one of the scariest things you've ever done?
Yes. I also sprained my foot going down.
Oh, going down.
Going down that mountain, which was a combination of hiking and ziplining down. And of course, I sprained my foot at the top of the mountain, so it was a long way down. But I have no regrets. I would still do it again.
Well, the question I was going to ask you is, I mean, obviously the first 10 minutes you said was very scary. Other than a good meal at the top, why'd you keep going? Because again, like we said a second ago, you were choosing to be there. No one was making you go up that ladder. What made you keep going to the top?
Well, I think what makes me keep going to the top, and in general keep going in a lot of these more adventurous, more dangerous activities sometimes that I do, I would say on a basic level, the feeling that it gives of accomplishing something, of succeeding. I think everybody likes the feeling of success, the feeling of accomplishment, the thrill. Everybody loves thrills, but also being a part of something, especially knowing that everything I do, everything that I explore, everything that I learn is just one more way that I'm improving myself and I'm making myself happier. So you could say it's all for selfish reasons. I like making myself feel good. I like gaining more knowledge. Feeling like I've become a part of something that a lot of people have not reached.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interconnectedness. I think that's what you're describing with the Peruvian experience, that it wasn't just about visiting and experiencing a culture, that you really were there long enough to kind of interweave yourself to their practices.
Making myself a part of it.
Yeah, that's cool. And one of the things that I've been thinking on in the recent years is what we have this general term, and it's even built in like the founding documents of our country of inalienable rights for happiness, right?
Yeah, pursuit of happiness. That's what I'm trying to do.
Well, but what is, so my question is, what is happiness really? And it seems like this elusive thing to what I've discovered with a lot of really good guidance and people that have gone before me through different parts of life to have been able to talk to is that we are most happy when we are living in our first principles. And so that starts with, what are my first principles? What those 2 or 3 things that are absolutely more important to me than anything else. I realized probably at about 35 years old, I'd gone 35 years and hadn't really clearly, succinctly written that down on a piece of paper. And so, you get to a point of pursuing different things that may or may not be in the first principle list. So what you've explained to me so far is some of those first principles for you, whether it was things that you inherited genetically or that you received implicitly from your dad and your mom or other experiences that you were going through. But I think whether you've written it out or not, you seem to me to be very clear on your first principles. And you seem very happy to me because you're doing these things in line with those first principles.
Yeah. Thank you for that. That means a lot, I think, when others recognize your happiness and what they see in you, because it's a lot of work. I would say happiness is very different for everybody. I have family that have no interest in travel or adrenaline type activities at all. They are happy to stay in their home, in their county, and they just have no desire to leave it. That's not where they get happiness from. For me, I would say going even deeper than what I've explained so far is, for me, happiness I've discovered can only be found through myself and not through other people. That there's no one else that is responsible for bringing me happiness. That would be an incredibly large job that would never be able to be fulfilled, but that I'm the only one that can bring me happiness. And exploring, learning, being a lifelong learner, and being parts of important things and the lives of others who've lived before me is just one of the ways that I find happiness and fulfillment and enjoyment and peace. And that peace and enjoyment helps bring me to the happiness that I would describe myself as being at.
Yeah. So, and I'm sure you've had these experiences on these different trips of there's a peak moment, whether you're actually on a peak or not, but where you go, I feel so alive. Like I've never felt this alive, or it's been a while since. And I don't think we're designed to live in that experience. We're maybe designed to experience that, and that then colors what else we do. And it probably pushes you to continue to pursue these things. But I'm going to ask this question, and I'm going to use it as a launching pad to go back through what you have done up to this point. But when was the last time that you can remember of that experience where you thought to yourself, I am absolutely feeling as alive today as I've ever felt?
Okay, so I've got 2 that come to mind. One that's not most recent, but one of the strongest I could probably give to you. And then another one that is recent.
Okay.
So the most recent one was when I traveled to Alaska, and it was always on my bucket list to see a reindeer.
Okay.
I wanted to see a reindeer. I also wanted to dog sled. I did that. That was great, very exhilarating, but I wanted to see a reindeer. And so I found out that there was a annual racing of the reindeer in Anchorage. And so I signed up. I got my racer bib. It's the most clothed I've ever been for a race. It was, full. It was maybe 15 degrees and snowing in March. So that was an experience right there. But yeah, I, as well as a bunch of other people, we just started running. We hear a bell ding far down the street behind us, which indicated they were releasing the reindeer.
Oh, this is like Pamplona running with the bulls.
Yes, it was like running with the bulls. And so Apparently,
Except it's Rudolph and all of his buddies.
Yeah, less pointy, less goring happening. But yeah, it was a race. Maybe a couple people, if you were actually trying to beat the reindeer, could beat them.
Yeah.
But we were running on the street in ice and snow with all of our heavy clothes on. So it got intense pretty quick. I slowed down pretty quick. And then just the rush, the wind passing, going through your face, your hair, as the reindeer just soared past, and they were fast.
I mean, are we talking like a half dozen reindeer, or was it?
It was about a dozen of them, and
enough to hurt you if you got.
They were
trampled.
the size of elk. They were not little babies.
Yeah,
they were. I mean, it was a very exhilarating experience, and I just remember thinking, I am running with reindeer, because many people don't even know that reindeer are actually real animals, and I am in Alaska in the snow. I am running with reindeer. This is a great time to be alive.
Yeah, it's one of those freaking awesome moments.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then I would say another time, this was when I was in Belize, and I was studying there for 3 weeks, and I had the opportunity to do this cave exploration experience. None of the other girls wanted to do it with me. So I ended up doing it with the 16-year-old son of one professor and the 60-year-old husband of the other professor. And it was through these caves that there's only 17 people in the world trained to take you through them and licensed by the government.
That should be warning number one.
No, what was warning number one was when they parked the van and we had to walk about a mile through the forest and then got to the cave entrance, where we had to get in the water and swim to the cave entrance. And before we got there, when we were walking in the forest too far from the van to return, was the guide told us to beware. It is the mating season for the snakes in the area.
Oh my gosh.
So they might be feisty and out more likely than normal.
And these are probably big snakes.
Yes, and I just remember thinking, okay, I'm basically in the rainforest. I mean, I don't know. It was too far. It was too late to turn back. Not that I would have. But then I think, okay, we got to swim to that cave, that underground cave. And are any of these snakes? Water snakes? I do not know. My head's flicking back and forth every little inch all over the place. But yeah, we went into the cave. It varied in terms of water depth. Sometimes it was to our ankles. Sometimes we couldn't touch and we had to swim. We had headlamps on our helmets. And the whole point of doing this cave exploration was about half a mile in and up. I'll get to that. But about half a mile in and up were the remains of an ancient Mayan sacrificial burial site. And so you could go and you could see the skeletons of the people that were sacrificed and some of the artifacts left around. And nothing had been removed to a museum. No museum or organization had moved in and tried to claim it. It was...
Did that have a similar sense or feel when you were walking in the slave castle in Ghana?
It didn't feel as sad or all encompassing, all surrounding. It didn't feel like it weighed me down as much. This, I think, also because of the element of adventure and the trek to get there, was a big distraction. There were some times when we had to go through extremely small holes and hoist ourselves up. I'm a small person, and there were some times, I don't have claustrophobia, but there's some times where even I was thinking, okay, that's a small hole to get through. But when we finally made it about half of the distance in, at one point our guide looks over at the wall, lifts his headlamp up, and says, "Come over here. Want to see this spider? You want to see the spider? And so the 16-year-old boy got there first. And all I hear is him going, whoa, look at it. That looks like something that should be on Animal Planet. And I said, nope, I'm good. I'm going to stay over here because I just know that there's all of these spiders. They're crawling on the water. They're on the walls. I don't need to see them. I want to be blissfully unaware of all of the eyes and legs that are pointed at me. But once we got all the way in half a mile, then we had to climb up to where the ledge was. And we saw skeletons that had the arms behind their backs, indicating that their hands were tied when they passed, when they were killed. We saw skeletons with gashes in their heads, like knife marks, things like that. It was an incredible experience seeing something that very few people had ever seen. And I love history so much. I've taught it. And so seeing what I've taught really adds even more meaning to what you can know is when you can see it with your own eyes.
You said this earlier, though. I mean, you get to experience these cultures, though, first person.
Yes.
This isn't you learn something in a book and then you pass it on to someone else.
Exactly.
Second and third hand. You were there, you experienced this, you formed your own opinions.
And you really feel a little bit of what they might have been thinking. They were trying to bring rain. They were trying to survive. They were trying to get their crops to grow. And they truly believed that this was going to appease the gods and that this blood, these human sacrifices, were what was needed to get that done. And so you can feel empathy, that desperation.
Yeah.
And it gives you more of a connection because when you're desperate and what you look around in the world and see what people do now when they're desperate. And so it just shows you that they're not so ancient and far away. They're the same as us.
The results were different, but the behavior is still...
The desires.
Yeah. It's still in our DNA. That's interesting. Okay, let's go back through as much as you can. Try to list off everywhere you have visited since you started traveling.
Okay.
Up to now.
So I would start off with some places in the Caribbean, including Puerto Rico, the Bahamas, the U.S. Virgin Islands, and I might be missing one or two islands, but to be fair, I do not remember those, so sometimes I don't count them in my total. Then I would say London, I meant England, France, Sweden, Denmark, Netherlands, Belgium, Germany, Czech Republic, Slovenia, Austria, Italy, Greece, then Ghana, Belize, Canada, Costa Rica, Guatemala, Aruba, Ecuador, Peru, China, Russia, Thailand, North Korea, South Korea.
You've been to North Korea?
Yes, only for 10 minutes.
Well, it still counts.
But hey, I count it.
Was it on purpose or accidental?
It was on purpose. Yeah.
It wasn't just like, oh crap, we crossed the border.
No, there's no way they would have let that happen. There's no accidental tourist crossing of the borderline. But yeah, basically that was DMZ. Went on a trip from Seoul to the DMZ, and I learned that the North Korean side and the South Korean side, they take turns over who has access to the main building where the conferencing happens that crosses both of the two borders, and the border crosses directly through the middle of the table. And so each one takes a turn having access to it and making sure the other side is locked out. And so for that, it was the South Koreans' turn, and so they do tours through it, and you're guided with American soldiers, and you can be on the North Korean side, and you can see the scratch marks of the nails of some of the South Korean soldiers that were trying to hang on as North Korean soldiers tried to drag them out their side. And that was very eerie.
Wow.
Now it's locked, the side is locked because each side unlocks it for the other side when they're switching. And so one time, 2 North Korean soldiers tried to grab that South Korean officer and tried to grab him out the door. And so now that's why they always do it 2 or 3 soldiers at a time instead of just one guy going over to unlock.
Jeez.
But yeah. And then I think the only other one I missed was Cuba. I think that's all. Iceland. I think I forgot Iceland. And I think that is all.
Okay, so that's quite a list. Off the top of my head, I don't know how old you are, but I know it's not 123.
30.
It seems like for most people, it'd take many, many decades to cover that much ground. You've obviously made it a priority, back to first principles again. These are the things that are most important to you, so you're doing it. What I'm curious about is what's still on the list, what is left to do, how quickly are you trying to accomplish these things? And then maybe the bow on it is, what do you hope to find out about yourself through continuing to pursue these adventures? Okay, so again, what's on the list, how quickly are you going to do these things, and what are you going to learn?
Okay, so what's closest on the list is I'm doing Uzbekistan in a month and Laos two months after that. And I originally had a goal of getting to all 7 continents. I originally had a goal of getting to all 7 continents before I turned 30. The pandemic put a big old wrench in that plan. I have visited 5 continents. I have 2 left.
What's
so
left?
Oceania. So I'm thinking New Zealand. I would love to do New Zealand, maybe Australia as well while I'm there, but I would certainly love to do New Zealand. And then Antarctica. Those are the 2 I have left, and that's still on my bucket list. So ideally in the next few years, I would have those 2 checked off, not because I'm in a rush, but because I don't want to leave something that's important to me to another time off in the far distance and possibly not get it done.
Yeah.
And I choose different places. Sometimes spur of the moment, not as in 10 minutes later I'm packing my bag and I'm going to that random spot, but I choose places based on the activities and the adventure and the fulfillment that it can give to me based on what I'm looking for at that time. And I always, of course, pay attention to recommendations, government recommendations and safety precautions and things like that. But I don't let things hold me back. And I listen to what my interests are and what my brain, my mind, and my heart are telling me in terms of my desires of where I want to go and what I want to do. I still am working on a lot of the states as well. I would love to visit all 50 states, but I've only done about 22 of them. And there are lots of places that I want to see on my bucket list, including the Great Pyramids of Giza, Japan, Sahara Desert. One trip I might be planning is to go to the Everest Base Camp in Nepal. I don't have a really big interest in climbing Everest, but I would love to be able to see the Himalayas. I've heard the sights, the scenery is amazing. I would love to be able to see that. An unrealistic thing on my bucket list is I would love to be able to see the Titanic before it disappears, as it will likely, be gone in the next couple decades, they say.
Oh, is that right?
Because of all of the organisms that are, feasting on it, basically.
Are there commercial trips
there
that
are.
you can
It
take down
is. Some things would have to change financially for me,
Okay.
for me to make it happen.
These are Jeff Bezos types of commercial trips.
Well, not even that expensive. I think I saw one where $100,000, you could go and you'd be living on a little submarine type situation, and you'd be able to do visits. You'd be along with different scientists and stuff like that. But it is possible, but currently not possible for me. That is in the big goals and dreams. Maybe with the lottery one day. It's part of the bucket list. But I also really want to do, there are a lot of things that maybe would be surprising on my bucket list, but that just shows that I don't think adventures have to be in some other country for you to, I don't think adventures would have to be in another country for you to get the enjoyment and happiness that you can get from doing them. I have learned to whistle with 2 fingers and grow my own food. I would love to own a goat, and I would love to bowl a 175 plus game. That one, I'm working on that one.
Yeah.
I would love to.
Have you ever tasted a goat?
I have. I've had goat cheese. No, I've had guinea pig. And I've had guinea pig in Peru. That's one of their that's their key traditional delicacy. That was very interesting. Surprisingly, no goat though. I would love to be a member of a TV studio audience.
That would be exhilarating.
Yeah. Oh, and here's another one that would have to be planned just right. I would love to travel back in time, and this is how I would do it. Every now and then, there is a flight that leaves Australia on the 1st of the year for Hawaii. And when it lands, it is still December 31st, the prior year. So people on that flight are in, say, 2023. It's 2023. It's a new year. And they fly, and when they land, they are in a different year, the previous year. They've traveled back in time.
That would be mind-blowing.
Yes, that would be mind-blowing, because you are traveling back in time. You would get to say it, but I would be so upset if I planned that whole trip and then it was delayed or something, and then it didn't happen.
You never know.
Yeah, so those are just a few of the things on my bucket list. Mud wrestling, going water skiing. I would love to meet a president. Some more than others. But doing the polar bear plunge, lots of just different experiences that are exciting, and maybe I am addicted to the adrenaline, but I think I would say not even that. I'm more addicted to the fun and the new experiences. Sometimes when people ask if I have hobbies, I'll say travel and history, but I would especially say that one of my hobbies is trying new things and trying new experiences, that I love newness and seeing what it's about, seeing the different impacts it has on me. But I would end by saying that no matter how many times I've traveled for all different lengths of time, that there's always come a point where I enjoy coming back home. I enjoy returning to family, returning to friends, returning to the comfort of familiarity and finding family again.
Yeah. So absolutely necessary to have the base camp and using the base camp as a launching pad to explore. So you're going to continue down the bucket list, continue exploring these different things, finding the experiences it's not adrenaline, it's probably dopamine. Which
that's a good point.
Very good, very helpful neurotransmitter that moves us towards things that feel good. It's a movement.
That's a good point, because there have been times I felt adrenaline and it didn't feel so good.
Right. It spikes and then it goes away, but the dopamine is moving you towards things that are positive for you. And so it feels great, but it's also, the thing that came to my mind is your world explorations are really self-explorations. You're just doing them in different geographical locations.
That actually makes me think of one of the reasons behind one of my tattoos. Is it's a glyph, and the glyph, I've got explore, learn, and the third one is transcend. And I included that one because I want to transcend what's my expectations were of me and what I could be, and be better and achieve more, see more, find more within myself than what was originally thought or expected. And I see a lot of my travels and exploration as one of those ways to help make that happen.
Yeah. So say those again, those three things.
It is learn, explore, and transcend.
Those are your first principles.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
I didn't even know you had a tattoo, but those describe everything that you've talked about for the last hour.
It does.
And it's
full circle.
Yeah, it's the gas in the engine.
Yeah.
So I am excited to hear about your other trips. I love hearing other adventures that people go on, but just make sure you get to the other side of that, of what you learned from, because bringing it back to humans being connected with other humans, that's how it all weaves together. So I can be inspired to go pursue my own first principles and adventures and things that make me come alive, because I hear about the way you came alive doing your things.
Exactly.
So keep it up. Let us know how it goes.
Thank you. Will do.
Be safe.
Thank you.
I know your mom's going to listen to this, so I'm throwing that in there for Mom.
Yes, always travel smart.
Yeah, very good.
Sure.
All right, Hannah, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay. Man, I really enjoyed that. I hope you did as well. The next one will be coming at you in a couple weeks, so stay tuned. Until then, I hope you have your own great adventure.